I want you to be Mary Poppins. So that you open that bag. That didn't work? Okay. That didn't work? Okay.
Absolutely.
And you can just keep pulling and pulling and pulling from there.
We are here for podcast 3, and I feel very lucky because while it is summer and it quiets down for us in education, I do have somebody who braved the hot weather of Qatar to come and spend some time with us before she leaves for greener pastures. So this is Adrienne Waller, who did her Cambridge PDQ in educational leadership. She does training. She's just kind of an all-arounder in my opinion, and I feel really fortunate we've got her with us. So Adrienne, why don't you tell the audience who you are and what your passion is?
So my name's Adrienne Waller. I'm from the United States of America. My Americanness is a lot of who I am as an educator, is a lot of who I am as a person as well. And you bring those two things kind of blend together frequently. I'm passionate about empowering teachers and what that looks like in schools and how that then trickles down into what happens in classrooms. And I think so often we separate the two and we think that to make change with students, you only focus on the students and then you forget the people who you're entrusting their lives to every day. And I don't feel like it has to be this choice of do you support teachers or do you support students. I think when you support teachers and you give them what they need, those resources, that goes right into the classrooms and you see it time and time again. And I know it from my own experience with them.
Okay, so when we're talking about empowerment really, and how that effect comes down and affects the students, which is a topic, as I told you, I'm very interested in, because again, we've talked about compassion, we've talked about teacher well-being, and I think it's a natural fit now to talk about empowerment and how that trickles down to the classrooms and to the students.
Yeah, so I think when I think about empowerment, I think about voice. Having a voice for those teachers to be able to say what happens in the school and how it happens. First are what's happening. What are our priorities? What are we saying is important? What are our values? And then after you know what your what's are, how do we go about achieving those things? Of course, to me, there's a step behind that that's not per se empowerment, but it's really getting that why. The why will drive all of those things. And like, I don't know if you've read Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. Amazing book. I recommend it to anybody in any field, but it's really having that clear sense of why. And I think educators, leaders, the community all have to be a part of that why, because when you have your why, you can pick what's, and then you can facilitate the hows. The hows are like the drive, how you actually get there. It's just like a map, you know what I mean? And you have to know how to get there. And there's so many different ways to get there. Like getting here today, I could have taken a lot of different routes, but I would still end up here. You know, this is thinking about that. And how do we get there? And having educators help you decide what route do you take to get there, and having leaders be in that conversation.
Are you saying we have to find out why we want to feel empowered, or what why question should we be asking ourselves to push our schools towards teacher, leader, community, student empowerment?
Well, that's really a good question. The whys you should be looking into are, why do we do this work? Why do we wake up? Why do we come here? Why are we doing this? And why are we teachers and not doctors? Why are we teachers and not policemen? You know, there's still certain, you know, that's still service, but this service looks a little bit different. And why did we pick this? And why do we have this school planted here right now? Because time and space all affect your why. So my why does sometimes shift a little bit, not completely. The core of it is the same. Like, I really believe in empowerment. That's core to me from top to bottom. But empowerment's going to look different when I take this journey over to Shanghai than it looked like when I was here. And it's looked different here than it did when I was in the United States. And understanding that that's okay, because it's going to be like how you empower people looks different, because the people you're serving look different. They need something different.
And just to give everybody a little bit more background, so Adrienne teaches here right now. Actually, that's not true. Adrienne doesn't teach here. Adrienne's in a position of leadership here for a group of schools, which presents its own set of challenges, is moving on to Shanghai. And I believe you worked in the States in charter schools, the public system as well. So can you tell us how your why started?
So my why is a little bit, it took a journey. And I say that because I wanted to be a teacher as a kid. And then for a long time, I wanted to be a teacher as a kid. And then I got to about high school. And then people got in my ear. You're too smart to be a teacher. You can do something better. Why would you just want to be a teacher? Teachers don't even make money. And all the litany of negative press that we get.
Absolutely. Such an important profession. I've said it a million, hands down, the most important profession we can do for development of the future, because we are the ones educating young minds. Go on.
So I actually went through AmeriCorps, and so then I was working with DC Public Schools in a nonprofit, and so I was supporting teachers. So I think teachers and parents. And so to me, that organization probably had a lot to do with that, thinking about how do we empower individuals who interact with education, but weren't necessarily, I wasn't having much direct contact with students. And then I said, okay, I need to do this. So I joined Chicago Teaching Fellows, which is an alternative certification program. So
okay, interesting.
Yeah, I got kind of thrown in the deep end. My first year was it was rough, which I think also impacted me understanding empowerment, because I didn't feel empowered. I felt very disempowered. I felt like I didn't have the knowledge, the skills. I didn't have that teacher competency to be empowered. That's really important in teacher empowerment, that if you need to feel confident in knowing your field, knowing your expertise, because this is a profession, not a job, right? That
I agree. It's, in my opinion, it's a calling.
That was going to be my next thing, which is why I think I ended up always coming back to teaching, because there was a call on my life to do this type of work.
I agree with you.
That journey of feeling disempowered, and my first few years, if I'm just blatantly honest, were tough, and it was finding the right school. And this is why I think time and space matter, because I think some of where I said I was struggling with teaching, some of it I just don't think I was in the place to be nurtured. That journey of feeling disempowered and knowing how that affected my classroom, knowing how that affected my students, and knowing the type of person I naturally am. I'm naturally that person who's going to tell you what I think, and you know, I've gotten better about how I frame that. But that journey of disempowerment, not feeling knowledgeable, feeling kind of left just like there.
See, this is why I want to have this discussion. So many teachers out there, so many leaders out there, Adrienne, will be able to connect with those feelings, and we don't talk about them enough. How many teachers don't feel empowered, who are left behind? How many teachers started this profession and it just became too much? So I applaud you for sitting here with me and talking about how difficult it was, and how you had to really show your resilience and show your grit, and this is what I was called to do, so this is what I'm going to do.
I like the growth of human beings, because I believe everybody has this want to learn. Teachers especially, we're very reflective people. And so I feel like my why shifted from, it still was support, because I think that support just expanded into more like adult support. But adult supports to enter the lives and the worlds and the experiences of children.
So can I ask you then, when we talk about teacher empowerment, what does that look like for you?
So there's two sides of it. So remember, I was talking about me feeling disempowered by not having the knowledge. For me, it's very, very important for educators to have the tools and the knowledge to support the decisions that they're making in their classroom, so that if they're challenged, which sometimes you're going to be, and it's okay, I don't think there's a problem with that, they're able to voice why they're making the decisions they're making. So what is this? I've chosen to have this discussion in my classroom. It's going to yield this, and this is, you know, this is the science behind it. So you have the art, and I feel like so many of the teachers have the art, but they miss the science. And the science is what gives you validity. It's what supports you. It's what allows you to take certain risks.
That's a good word. So do you think that if we empower the way you're describing it to me, giving the opportunity to make decisions, because a lot of teachers do feel like they have no power within their own classrooms. Is that what you're thinking about with empowerment? We should, as educational leaders, be having those decisions with teachers. This is your classroom. These are the outcomes you need to hit, and you can get there whichever way you think is best, within a reasonable, obviously within.
Of course.
Do you think that would help?
Oh, I know it would.
Good.
And not just that, I think it's targeted conversations. So I feel like I've been in situations where PD is like this, and we're on this topic, we're on this topic, we're on this topic, we're on this, and I can't keep up.
Absolutely.
If I can't keep up, and I like to consider myself pretty, there's a lot of people not able to keep up. And
Absolutely.
so I think and this goes back to that why and how, when you pick that, then now when you're producing PD during the year, it follows one track that teachers, you can see the growth with, instead of, oh, first we're doing this. Oh, wait, now we're going to talk about this. So that starts to empower them so that you can, as a leader, trustingly allow them to make those decisions. Because a lot of times as leaders, just like teachers, you don't let them make these decisions because you're scared that they're not going to make the right choice, that they can't do it. And so you have to, as a leader, start helping them to be knowledgeable, to be skilled, to know their stuff.
Yeah.
So that when you release them, you know that you're releasing somebody who's competent. Like, you don't just go driving a car. You go through all the lessons that are going to help you there, so that by the time you get that license, the power to decide where you're going, the power to decide how you get there, there's some trust that you know how to get there. And I think a lot of times teachers want to say, well, my teaching license is my license to that. And to some degree it is. But like I said, time and space affect all of those things.
Well, like you said, in your own experience, you're a different educator now than you were when you started. So then what do you think about personality driven teaching? You know, for example, as you said, Americanism is a big part of who you are. Being African American is a big part of who you are. So how does that drive empowerment for you? How does that look for you? Because I think that's something that I really respect about you, as we've gotten to know. This is me. This is what I think. These are the things that grew me into the leader and the educator and the passionate person that I am now. And not enough people recognize their personal empowerment.
Well, I think it's funny. I was just talking to somebody about not losing. This is going to sound like I'm going off, but stay with me.
Okay.
So not losing yourself in like toxic environments. And how this relates is, you don't lose yourself when you know yourself. And that's not just the teacher self, but those are things that are intrinsic to who you are. And we've had some of these conversations about how important honesty and authenticity are to me. To be authentic, I have to own all of who I am. I'm short. I'm a Black woman with big natural hair. I have a loud voice. You know, I'm from Michigan, which is different than, you know, like, I'm a millennial. Like, that's one thing I've started to learn a lot impacts all of these different things. Like, I was talking to a teacher who is an American teacher who he's only taught under Common Core standards. I remember the shift.
Yes.
You know, and so all of those things really impact you. And so you have to own them. Own them, both your struggles, you know, like, hey, when I first started teaching, I struggled to be lesson plan deadlines. I was like, all through my teaching, there were those days where that was not something I was strong in. But seeing big picture and mapping something out and taking pieces and ordering, that was my strength. But you have to know what those are, because then you can find the complement. So when you're building teams as a leader, you can put people together who support each other in these different ways, where you learn just by watching, just by being in that space and collaborating with them.
Yep.
I'm learning your skill of being able to meet deadlines better, because I realized, oh, what you did is you did this little piece, and that's how you are able to meet your deadline. Or maybe I was being too much detail in certain things,
right?
And that detail had me get lost. So I think it's really important, back to your original question, is as you know who you are, that identity who's brought you to the person who you are outside of the classroom, you will always take that into your classroom. Like, I used to tell my kids, I say, what's up, homie? You know, because that was personal, and they felt personal, because not every teacher called them homie.
They connected with you at that point. Like we were talking about connections. Mm-hmm. So do you believe connections are part of empowerment then?
Yes, I think connections are part of empowerment, because those connections help validate what you're doing. So when you're in that conversation with another educator, and you might disagree, but that process of telling them why you disagree, how you got there, what you should do, you're learning from them. And so that communication is helpful. But then you walk away feeling more empowered, because whatever you all came up with, you come up with together. So it's collaboration, I think, is really very empowering, because you walk out a much more informed person. Like, some of my best experiences in teaching were when I was really challenged to think about things.
So how then do you think we should empower teachers to embrace collaboration? And when we talk about collaboration, are we talking about teachers with other teachers? Are we talking about community collaboration? Does empowerment,
I think we're talking about all of those.
come across these? So how does that look to you?
So I think when I'm talking about collaboration, I'm
Yep.
talking about it on multiple levels. Like,
Okay.
I think parent-teacher collaboration is so important. Because
Can you describe that to me?
yeah, so one thing I used to do when I was still in the classroom is the first week of school, and I told some teachers this and they thought I was crazy. I spent that week calling every single parent.
Okay.
Because nobody's really made you that mad yet. So
Yes.
this allows my first interaction with this parent to be something positive.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
Right? So that I'm starting off kind of a step above.
Yep.
So that when they see the number, they know I might not be calling to complain about.
I think that's a great idea. I love that idea.
But then also I sent home a parent survey. So if I had gotten the parent survey back from the parent, I would talk about some of the questions that were on here. Hey, I noticed that one thing you said was really important for your child was to improve as a reader. And I would either right there give them a couple of things I know right away, or just kind of general good things, practice. So now that parent feels empowered, right? Because they don't know the teacher stuff. Yeah. So I start teaching the parent so that that's going to help me when I have to look at my test scores and that parent has supported me and we're walking hand in hand. They're empowered as a parent to best support their child at home, right? But that happened through a conversation. That happened through us collaborating and you telling me what your needs are, and me telling you how I think you can get there, and then you telling me. And one of the questions I put in there was, how do you think? Well, think about your favorite child's teacher. What did that teacher do? Now think about some of your less favorable experiences and what were those, so that I have an idea of how do I attack this parent. This parent really likes that they use Class Dojo and post it on a regular basis. This other parent might tell you they didn't because it was too public and they didn't like how public celebrations were. So I can now approach this classroom a little bit differently. So that's when I'm thinking about parent collaboration.
So do you consider that, I'm glad we're talking about this now. So do you consider part of empowerment sitting back and listening sometimes?
Yes. Yes.
Because not everybody would, so I'm glad we're having this discussion.
Because you can't get into, I think, so part of doing that is building trust, right?
Yes.
And trust is such a sensitive thing, and it's something you can't put your finger on, right? Mm-hmm. You know when it's there, and you know when it's not.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
But one way you build trust is by sitting back and being a good listener, and an honest listener. And I had to kind of check myself on what that looked like. And I remember sitting back and I did surveys with my teachers to give me feedback, critical feedback about how I had done, which is really important to that. And I posed the question and just sat and took notes. And I had to hold myself a couple of times. But the amount I learned and the growth I did, I felt so much more empowered when I went to go talk to teachers because I knew what they wanted, because I listened to them.
Yep. So let's talk about personal and self-driven development. Where do you think personal and self-development does? And it relates directly back to what you were saying, is how you feel as a female, as a millennial, as an American, so how does that hold hands with empowerment?
So I think when you develop yourself personally, so at the beginning of this year, I asked some of my teachers, I asked them two questions. I said, why do you do this work? You know, like what brought you here?
Yeah.
And then I asked them what are their goals. And I told them, please know that I'm not saying it has to be, I want all of my children in year one reading, blah. It doesn't have to be that. I said, one teacher told me, I want to have a better work-life balance. I want to be able to turn off when I go home.
See, those sound like meaningful conversations.
Right. One of them talked about, well, long term, I want to open my own school, but early years school in my home country.
Yeah.
So that was powerful for multiple reasons. One, I have insight to my teachers I just never had before.
Yeah.
But also, it helped me to push them in their personal growth and personal development.
Okay.
And talk to them about ways to get there. Because I think when you hear personal development, you think it happens by yourself, right? Because it's personal. And to some degree, yes, it does. It's at home doing searches. It's picking where you're going to go for professional development. Yes. But I think leaders, we have a lot to do with what that personal development looks like, because we have a set of tools and knowledge to help them get there. It's kind of like you don't know what questions to ask. So you might know I'm struggling with this, but you don't know, well, you can go look here, here, and here. And I think that's where leaders play a part in that personal development of a teacher and helping them kind of hone in and look into that in a little bit more detail, because sometimes you misattribute where you see the problem. So it's like someone who's not a doctor and they try and diagnose things.
Yes.
And I think that's where with leaders it's really important to help with that personal development, to help teachers know which way to go about that journey.
And do you think that by investing in your teachers, by getting to know them personally and getting to know what their personal goals are, that will then make them feel more empowered?
Yeah.
Within the class, which will then drive their why.
Not just
this is why I'm doing this.
Yeah, not just in the classroom, but in the school, right?
Oh,
because you have to realize that you're working in a classroom that is in a school. And so what happens in the school impacts what happens in your classroom.
Okay.
And if you feel like you can go talk to your leader, tell your leader where you failed, where you need some help, how to get there, and then come back and talk about your successes or a second failed attempt. There's an empowerment to try, to risk take, to do something different.
Absolutely.
And that, to me, that's where magic happens, right?
Absolutely.
So it's really important that you know who you're working with, what they need, both how they're going to receive your feedback, because not everybody, I've learned to shift how I give feedback to teachers.
So as we talk about empowerment and as we talk about these meetings and these meaningful connections and how we empower teachers, ourselves, our leaders, what about time? I mean, let's face it, Adrienne, everyone talks about it. There's no time.
Yeah. You have to make the time for those things that are important. You have to start valuing this as much as you value looking through the standards, as much as you value lesson planning, as much as you value all these different things that you marking your books and all of that. You have to value the time to sit and talk with other educators about what's working, what's not working, how we can change.
I am so happy you brought that up. So what do you think about, do you think that having these meaningful discussions at school or with other schools, with other teachers, is also part of empowerment and also part of our whats and our whys?
Of course. You know,
Tell
if
me
you're
about
not
them.
having these conversations, if you're not talking about
Or
it,
prioritizing.
yeah, or you only have a little bit of time to do it, you're not investing in yourself like so much. And teachers, like when you look into like research and studies about it,
Right.
teachers want to be in conversations. They want to learn from each other. Who better to learn from than somebody who's going through that same journey as you?
100%.
So I think it's so important, because then you walk away. I think part of empowerment is feeling like you have a toolkit. I always tell my teachers, I'm trying to build your toolkit. I want to give you more things so that you have something else to put you. I want you to be Mary Poppins, so that you open that bag. That didn't work? Okay. That didn't work? Okay.
Absolutely.
And you can just keep pulling and pulling and pulling from there in a way that now you feel empowered, because you don't feel like, oh, if I just do this one thing and it doesn't work, I don't know what to do. You're like, oh no, I can do. And that comes from conversations with people about where they failed and where they made mistakes.
Oh my goodness. And if we empower people to make mistakes,
Yes.
the discussions become even more
yes,
valuable, right?
Yes.
Because then you can, the way you do, I mean, I think it's so brave the way you, and say, in the beginning, I can assure you, my teaching wasn't, not everyone is willing to take that leap of faith that they're not going to get judged.
Yeah. I remember one time we, my school did data. Like, you know, data is the big conversation.
Absolutely.
But they did it in such a powerful way that every week we had a data meeting. Okay. And at first, I hated these meetings. Oh my goodness, yet another data meeting. But over the year, like literally every week we sat and we went through and we put the kids into these different piles of how they did on it. And then we did like an item analysis. How did they do on these questions? Where do you see most of the mistakes? And then we talked to each other. Your class did really, really well. Your class had the highest, because you then called out how you did. 10 kids who had this, 7 kids. So, you know, that little point, you're like, you always wanted that competition, healthy competition, because it was supportive. Because then we sat down and together decided, how do we go forward when either all of us bombed or 3 of us bombed and one of us didn't?
Yep.
What do we do? How do we tweak that? What is it that you were doing in your classroom? Tell me, please, you know, and had the time to do it. So then I can say, okay, when I go back, I'm using that. They brought in these manipulatives. Oh, they showed this video and that activated their, whatever it was. But I heard from somebody very specifically, but then I started to find more just tools in general. So some of them were very specific to those lessons that we taught, but some of them were good teaching strategies and practices that I picked up that I was the most senior teacher on the team, but I was learning from the teacher who was in her first year. Absolutely. And vice versa.
Yeah, no. So are you saying then part of empowerment is time, the gift of time?
Yes.
If you give the gift of time, you're empowering your teachers to actually breathe. Take a moment to breathe and think, I am going to take on this PD. I am going to sit here and I'm going to be part of this discussion and be present and be authentic and be honest because I have time.
Yeah, and when you have that time, you're more likely to be honest and you're more likely to be authentic. When you're pressed on time, you don't take those risks because to be authentic is a risk, right? To tell somebody, hey, that lesson was terrible. I didn't even like doing it myself. That's a risk, and a lot of us won't take it. Or to look and say, hey, this year wasn't a good year for me. You know, my kids didn't grow. Why didn't, like, that takes time to be able to say that because you have to have the time to then get somebody to support you through it, right?
And I have to tell you, it really resonates with me as we're having this discussion, what you started with. Teachers are naturally reflective. I think it's one of the reasons they get into the business of teaching. And in many ways, maybe we're not cultivating that.
Yeah.
Being able to say, you know what, this wasn't my year.
Yeah.
This really wasn't my year, and I'm going to reflect why. But I need time, and I need other people to talk about it with.
Because when you first see yourself teaching a lesson, oh, that's tough. But when it becomes a practice and it becomes something that's natural, you can start, okay, I see this is happening, I see this is happening. And also when somebody comes in to give you feedback, there are things that when people came in and saw me teach, I didn't even know I was doing. Like just these natural things. But now that I know it, and some of them were good things that I was doing, now I can replicate that because I was just naturally doing it. But now I have the power to know that this is an effective decision that I'm making.
So not just empowered.
I'm not just randomly doing something.
Absolutely.
How do you find
time?
So some of it is sitting down and writing out your priorities, right? Because I think a lot of it is not that you're not getting more time. Like there's no sense of more time. A day has 24 hours. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Especially in the teaching profession, everyone talks about how they have no time. So that's a really good, how do you incorporate time to give teachers to talk to other teachers? And outside of team meetings, we all know, and even in team meetings, teachers complain and leaders complain there's no time.
So I think, like I said, it's prioritizing and starting to realize where are we spending time that we don't have to. So like staff meetings,
that's a great answer.
How many staff meetings have you gone to where you're like, you could have emailed me this?
Yes.
Waste of time, you know?
Yes.
But and maybe you only have 30 minutes for your staff meeting, but letting one teacher each week present at that staff meeting some strategy that they're effectively using in their classroom. Wow, now you've just given more time. It's really sitting down and realizing, hey, we don't need to be doing this, or we don't need to be doing this now. Right? Because sometimes it's prioritizing what happens right now.
Yep.
Right? Is this for our big goal this year? No. Okay, table it.
So it is like community empowerment. When at the top we're saying we value time and we value the way you use it, that's naturally going to create an environment where creative time is found.
Yeah, but also knowing why you're doing that work in the first place.
The whys.
Because then you can weed out all of the stuff you don't need. It's in the Start With Why, he talks about the celery example.
Yes.
And it's when you look at somebody's cart of things that they're putting on the belt to be, would celery match in that or would it not? And I think that's the same thing we have to be at. Does this match with what we're doing? Now, if you have a bunch of bread and canned food, celery probably doesn't match with what you're buying. But if you have lots of fresh fruits, lots of, meat from the deli, all of those different things, then celery might match with that. And so thinking about, does this go with this package that I have or what I valued as being important? So when you have your why and you use that to drive, it allows you to sift through all the other stuff that won't get you to that why and move that on, because maybe later you'll get to those things, because maybe later the priorities have shifted. But right now that's not a priority, so I'm going to use my time on this so that you can have more time to do the things that help that why.
And again, you're empowering your teachers to be a part of the why.
Right, because they help you say, because sometimes as leaders we don't realize that we've duplicated things. Like we've given teachers a task 2 different ways to do the same thing, and there may be a way to consolidate that that's going to then give them more time to do something else, to do something that's possibly more meaningful, or even just listen. Sometimes teachers will tell you things they don't want to do, and you as a leader have to say, no, this is important, but this is where that communication comes in. This is important, and this is why this is important. This is why I need you doing these things. And yes, I know it takes some time, and if you need me to sit there with you, I'll sit there with you, because I want you to feel like you can do it. And so that's that empowerment. I'm there with you. I'm not leaving you alone. We're on this journey together.
Yeah. So if there is anything that you would want to close with, that you would want to make sure that we get across from our discussion, what would that be?
Value collaboration, value time, and know that you can't have one without the other. You have to have the time to have the collaboration. You have to take the risk, and you have to be willing to say, hey, I didn't do it right, and that's okay. And go on that journey together.
I love that.